Hello everyone, I'm Anish Borah, a designer from New York City, currently in Boston, and welcome to my talk, Type as Our Identity. Today I'll be presenting my work for my final year in college that traces my journey from my homeland, India, to my second home, the United States. My journey has not only changed my perspective of the world, but also shaped a large part of who I am today. I'm going to share how this college project became an ongoing personal project, the challenges I faced, how I identified a bigger issue, what I'm doing to address these issues, and last but not the least, how can you help as well? In order to understand my project, let's dive into certain events of my life. As I mentioned before, I'm from Assam, one of the northeastern states of India. If you ever had Assam tea, it's from there. I moved to the capital of the country, New Delhi, for my last 2 years of high school and eventually to the United States for college, during which I studied away in Japan twice. Moving multiple times, experiencing different cultures, and leading different lifestyles, I wanted a medium to show my journey and growth as a person. When I had to do my senior thesis in college, I started thinking about what defines one's identity. A few elements that came to mind are clothes, food, music, dance, and sports. Eventually, I came to one aspect which I believe is the foundation of one's identity. It is one of those components of a person's life which you are introduced to first and that defines you. I'm a graphic designer, which always meant that I provide creative solutions to problems that clients come to me with. I've always thought more like a designer and less as an artist. This was one of the biggest obstacles I had to overcome for my thesis because I was my own client now. So I did what I do for my clients, identify the problem at hand. How do I use language to show my identity, which is a combination of Indian and American culture? The answer, typeface. Not having any formal training in type design, I relied heavily on books and online resources to do my project. I combined two different typefaces, one from Latin and one from Devanagari, to make a hybrid display typeface. It wasn't meant to be functional, but it portrayed the values that I was brought up with, combined with a Western look based on how I dress and carry myself. Contrary to popular questions I get in the US, I don't speak Indian. I grew up learning three languages: Assamese at home, Hindi watching TV and movies, and English at school. I decided to use Hindi to represent my Indian identity and English to show how the Western culture has influenced me, as they were the most widely spoken languages from the list. I started sketching the corresponding alphabets to create a new typeface. That was when I ran into my next obstacle. My languages are of two different scripts, which meant it was almost impossible to create a working writing system. Not having equal number of alphabets in Latin and Devanagari wasn't my only obstacle. Sometimes they didn't even have corresponding sounds. So I moved away from the visual aspect of my project and started focusing on a key that will help me make the typeface. As a solution, I wrote down the English letter pronunciation in Hindi. Let's look at example here. Here the letter N, pronounced as N, can be written like this in Hindi. I use English letters as the base and parts of Hindi letters to create a new typeface, demiglyph. Yeah, I kept the name really simple. If you were expecting a creative name from me, I'm really sorry. I named my files final underscore final PST. I don't know why you had high expectations from me. Here are some initial exercises that I did. I tried to overlap different letters to see how they work together. In my second run, I tried to combine them and see what works and what doesn't. I went with a serif Latin typeface since it worked well with the non-uniform strokes of the Hindi letters. Here's an example to show how my letters evolved. First, I sketched them out, then I overlapped them in my second run. tried to put them together, then cleaned them up, and then decided to go with serif instead of sans serif, and there you have it. But I was not done yet. One of the distinct differences between Hindi and English is that Hindi doesn't have a lowercase. So I created a lowercase in the impression of the upper. Now, Demigif perfectly showed my identity, a person who looks Western from the way he dresses, talks, and walks, but with core Indian values. Here are some of the posters I made to showcase some of the letters in my final exhibition. But this type project was only the beginning. Soon I graduated and moved to New York City, where I met a ton of type designers during an event called Type Thursday. I slowly learned more about type design and made a lot of friends. Shout out to you guys if you're watching right now. I also got a chance to present my project and get valuable feedback. My next goal was to make this abstract art into a functional typeface. But in order to do that, I needed to understand more about Indian typography, especially Assamese since it was my mother tongue. Here is when I faced challenges finding information and materials not only about Assamese but Hindi too. Most designers that I talked to who designed Devanagari typefaces never pointed me to a source that was consistent or that had all the answers I was looking for. Fast forward to December of 2019, there were mass protests in India due to the Citizen Amendment Act enacted by the government, with protests starting in the home state of Assam. I don't want to get too much into the protests, but one of the main concerns of the Assamese people was the decline in local culture and language due to the high influx of illegal immigrants from another ethnic group. This got me thinking that some of these concerns might well be in place. Cultures evolve quickly, and the state of languages change or some die out. You might wonder if I have a solution. In fact, I do. It's pretty simple. We need to design more typefaces for languages that may not have enough active speakers. This is not something that hasn't been done before. You might be thinking of the Google Note of Font project. It's when this guy partnered with this guy to create some fonts to make knowledge more accessible. This is amazing, but this issue is too big for even a corporation like Google to solve single handedly. We need to design typefaces for languages from communities that might not even have a type designer. Languages that don't incentivize big corporate industries to put their capital and resources in. Even though Assamese is not from a very small community, let's take it as a point of reference for the following discussion. Here's the Google Noto site. When you look for Assamese, they point you to Bengali. This is because Bengali has 250 million active speakers compared to Assamese, which has only 15 million. Moreover, our scripts are almost identical with a few differences. Similarly, Microsoft has the Vrinda font family, which is also a Bengali typeface and is used alternatively for Assamese. If a language like Assamese, which has around 15 million active speakers, doesn't even have an exclusive typeface in a project like Google Nodo, then it might be too late for smaller languages that are even less accessible to the world. Google's project was aimed to make the knowledge they present more accessible. This possibly means that they were focusing on languages that their data showed didn't have digital accessibility and were being used by their users. This makes me wonder, what about languages which have never transitioned into the digital world? Now, let's look at Apple. The iOS 13 Apple keyboard added support for Assamese along with 22 different Indian languages only last year to appeal to the Indian smartphone market. Their motivation wasn't from a welfare perspective but a financial one. Moreover, since these tech giants are trying to dominate the world, there might be some lack of collaboration. Fortunately, Assamese has a typeface, and I grew up seeing Assamese print material and in the recent years digital material. But I have my doubts if these typefaces are accessible to all kinds of operating systems and are kept up to date. Most typefaces just use Bengali to substitute for Assamese. These days, I've been trying to find out more about how Bengali and Assamese typefaces differ, apart from their obvious character sets. If you design Assamese typefaces or know more about this, please hit me up. My concern is not only the lack of typefaces in different languages, but the lack of type design education which is accessible to all. Most of the books I have or that you might own are probably for designing Latin typefaces. I have found a few helpful links online for designing Devanagari typeface, but they're mostly geared towards type designers, and there's a learning curve to it. And a lot of them also assume that you already know to design a typeface in Latin first and go from there. My primary concern, however, is not for Devanagari typefaces. That's just my point of view since I'm more familiar with it. Like I mentioned before, I'm more worried about languages whose information is probably recorded by hand or traditional offset printing and that they haven't even gone digital yet. I don't have all the answers. Maybe some of you do. Please share those with me during my Q&A session or connect with me later. But at the time of this recording, I have two things going on from my end to help with this issue. First, to help with the distribution of these typefaces and make them more accessible to the world, I'm working on creating a project, a website with resources and guidelines that one needs to keep in mind while making these typefaces. I've been talking to a lot of designers from different countries to identify the challenges they face. This would help even designers like me who don't have a formal type training. I don't have more information regarding this project while I'm recording this, but hopefully future Anish will have the answers. So make sure to roast him during his Q&A. I will also be posting more about this project on my Instagram if I haven't already. I like your help and contribution, so please reach out to me there. Second, I recently created an inclusive community called Creative Huddle, where creatives from all domain and backgrounds can come together and collaborate. I believe that a lot of us only know the American and the European narrative of creatives, which I hope to change with this community. Hundreds of people have joined since the group started in July, and I would like to invite you too. It is not limited to graphic design or type design, so feel free to spread the word. I hope that these initiatives help me break language and cultural barriers and make information and design more accessible to the world. Okay, so I understand that there might not be enough resources or monetary incentive for you to design a type for a language that's almost extinct. But as a kid, I always wanted to change the world, save the world rather. And being in the design industry, I seldom get those opportunities. So I encourage you to design and develop a typeface in your native language or a language close to your native language if a typeface in your language already exists. First, maybe start with one weight each for print and web and develop it further to have a complete character set with different weights. I do want to put an extra emphasis on making this type web friendly as we are going more digital day by day. This will help save languages, revive languages, preserve cultures, preserve history and knowledge for the future generation, give voices to oppressed communities, give you a chance to be a hero, and most importantly, this will allow us to use type as identity. Thank you.